The notification arrived at 3:04 a.m. Not a phone call, not a letter, just a system-generated ping from a federal server, a cold digital execution, delivered in the dead of a Calgary winter. Status: rejected. Reason: non-compliant formatting. Richard Dodge sat in his home office. His family was asleep, unaware that the financial cornerstone of their next quarter had just evaporated. This was a $450,000 community development grant, 112 pages of socioeconomic data, 17 letters of support, a budget table that had taken 11 days to build from raw census figures. The software had not even reached his narrative. It had stopped at the technical appendix on page 3. Deep within page 84 of the request for proposals was a subclause regarding PDF conversion, a specific margin setting of exactly 1.0 inches, a 10-point Arial font for all table captions. The AI drafting tool Richard had used had auto-adjusted the margins to 1.2 inches and bumped the font to 11 point. The federal portal's automated gatekeeper flagged the discrepancy in 1.4 seconds. It did not offer a chance to edit. It simply closed the door. Richard did not feel anger. He felt something worse. The machine had failed the machine. And Richard was left staring at a screen that had erased 6 weeks of his life and a neighborhood's future before the sun came up. He sat there for 2 hours, trying to figure out how he was going to make that phone call in the morning. The problem: Richard was not a corporate consultant billing Fortune 500 clients. He was a specialist for small, mission-driven nonprofits, organizations where a single rejected grant can mean 3 staff members lose their jobs before Christmas. His clients did not have reserves. They had hope and a deadline. For 11 years, his professional life had been governed by a 22% success rate, respectable in the grant-writing world. But the internal cost was something the industry never talks about. Every proposal consumed 40 to 50 hours, not creative writing, grinding administrative endurance. 15 funders, 15 separate systems, 15 sets of rules he carried in his head because there was no other place to put them. He was a strategist buried alive under data entry, hard-capped at 2, maybe 3 major proposals per month. If one failed, his quarterly revenue did not dip. It collapsed, no cushion. Just Richard, his desk, his coffee going cold, and a burnout that had been building for years. When he discovered generative AI, he believed he had finally found his leverage point. He did not yet understand that he was walking toward the most expensive lesson of his career: the discovery. The first time Richard used ChatGPT to draft a statement of need, he did not move for a full minute. What had just happened in 4 hours would normally have taken 3 full working days. He fed the system a decade of his strongest successful grants, uploaded the RFP requirements, and watched as the tool generated a narrative that was structured, specific, and 80% of the way to submission ready. He started pushing further, complex prompts analyzing federal labor statistics woven directly into the narrative. Background research that used to take a full week was now happening in an afternoon. He felt like he had hired a team of 10 overnight. He moved his funder tracking to instrumental. For the first time in 11 years, all 15 funders were visible on a single dashboard. Automated deadline alerts replaced his manual calendar. New opportunities surfaced he never would have found on his own. He began submitting 4 major federal proposals in a single week. Something physically impossible 6 months earlier, 5 times his normal speed. He stopped doing final manual read-throughs. If the AI said the document was coherent, he trusted it. If the data checked out, he hit submit. So focused on the horizon that he stopped watching the road directly in front of him. Speed without a steering wheel is just a faster way to hit a wall. The failure. The $450,000 community center grant was supposed to validate the entire new system. Richard used AI to sharpen every sentence, cross-referenced the budget against 3 federal data sources, reviewed the narrative 4 times. He felt more prepared than he had ever felt in his career. Then came the 3:04 a.m. notification. By 7 a.m. he was still at his desk. He had not slept. When he found it, the margin setting, the font size, the AI's quiet auto-adjustment, he felt sick. At 9:15 a.m. he called the executive director. She picked up on the second ring. Did we get it? Her voice was bright. She had been waiting all week. Richard took a breath. It was rejected on a formatting technicality. He talked about the margin setting, the font size, the AI's auto-adjustment on table captions. But as the words left his mouth, he could hear how they sounded. To a woman who had spent 6 months preparing her board, to a director trying to keep a building from being condemned. The AI changed. The font was not an explanation. It was an admission of negligence. That night, Richard sat in his office and genuinely considered closing the firm, not restructuring it. Closing it. In his rush to scale, he had stopped being a grant writer. He had become a prompt engineer, and prompt engineers do not carry professional responsibility. Grant writers do. The AI had built a beautiful narrative on a foundation the federal government's automated gatekeeper could not recognize. That was not the AI's fault. It was his, the rebuild. Richard did not abandon the tools, but he did not trust them the same way again. What he built over the next 8 months he called the forensic loop. The premise was simple. The AI provides the muscle. The human provides the skeleton. He stopped asking AI to write grants. He started asking it to process modules, 12 discrete sections, each one drafted, verified, and approved independently. Nothing moved forward until the previous module had cleared a compliance check. He rebuilt his use of instrumental entirely, no longer just a deadline tracker. He used it to reverse engineer funder behavior, studying which proposal structures had succeeded in each subsector over the previous 3 funding cycles. Before he wrote a single word, he knew exactly what a winning proposal looked like for that agency. He brought Grammarly into the workflow for compliance, not grammar. Custom-style guides mirroring the exact technical requirements of each RFP. If an agency required 10-point Arial on table captions, that rule was hard-coded. Any deviation triggered an automatic flag before the document ever reached his eyes. Then, the human-in-the-loop audit. A final manual pass with nothing to do with writing quality, everything to do with the geometry of the page. Margins, file naming conventions, metadata, the invisible architecture that automated gatekeepers check before any human reviewer sees your work. The first proposal under the new system passed automated screening without a single flag. Awarded in full. The second passed. The third passed. The pattern held. The results. 8 months after the 3:04 a.m. rejection, Richard pulled his numbers. His success rate had moved from 22% to 44%. A complete doubling in less than a year. Time per proposal dropped from 40+ hours to 12. 15 funders became 45. 3 times the proposals. Measurably higher accuracy. He hired a part-time assistant whose sole responsibility was the final PDF compliance check, a permanent second human layer against the 3:04 a.m. scenario. Then the federal cycle came back around. Same agency, same community center. Richard submitted a revised proposal under the full forensic loop protocol. A week later, a program officer confirmed it had cleared automated screening and was advancing to final review. 3 weeks after that, the grant was awarded. Richard called the executive director. She cried. He did not. AI used correctly does not make you faster at the expense of being careful. It makes you careful at a speed that was previously impossible. Richard Dodge's story is not a warning about AI. It is a blueprint for what happens when professionals stop using AI as a replacement and start using it as a system component. The failure was never the tool. The failure was the absence of a verification layer. The moment Richard stopped being the final auditor of his own work, he became vulnerable to a server that did not care about his narrative, his data, or his client's mission. It only cared about the margin setting. That lesson applies in every high-stakes professional field. The goal is not to work faster. The goal is to build a system that operates at a scale previously impossible, without surrendering the clinical precision that separates professionals from amateurs. Build the machine. Vet every module. Check the margins yourself. If this kind of thinking applies to the work you do every day, subscribe to the AI Advantage. New episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.